I've still got people coming, so maybe we should wait 2 more minutes.
I think it's kind of like popcorn. When I'm making popcorn, you hear the last pop and you count 1001, 1002, 1003, you give it a few seconds and then you know that's done. And it's kind of like popcorn because they pop up and look at all these kernels.
Roger, I'm a huge popcorn person, and that's also when I always burn the whole mass. Waiting too long, and not that applies in popcorn.
I think you broke up a little bit there, Ann. Looks like you're outside walking.
Roger, did you say I am muffled?
You were breaking up a little bit. The muffling wasn't a thing. It was just dropping off. Where are you walking?
I'm trying to do this on the phone. I am walking in my neighborhood. I've had great success doing Zoom outside once I'm already seated at the park. But in this case, I'm moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can have signal drop on my phone, even though I'm sitting on the sofa, and I'm pretty sure the cell tower is not moving. If you have a pet in the background, you might want to mute your phone, your audio.
You mute your pet.
Pets, kids, family members.
What about my partner coughing?
Well, whatever you think, Roger.
Well,
Kathy Knoll was the last person to join. Yeah.
Does it look like there's anybody else coming? Anybody we're missing that we should be here?
Well, like you said, Sue Schenk might come late, but I'll keep an eye out.
Okay.
Was Jason Morgan coming?
I don't know I didn't hear one way or the other.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, Councilmember Griswold.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
You don't happen to have Molly Lambert Coy's phone number from DTE with you, do you?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. You're wonderful. Okay. If you could give it to me, I want to expedite a streetlight outage.
Okay. Let me pull over, as it were, and send that.
Hey, this isn't a city council meeting. Come on.
Yeah.
Gelman is my top priority, Roger, but we have to keep the lights on.
It should be everybody's for the next couple of weeks at least. Very short time period. We have some very severe time constraints. All right, well, let me bring up the agenda. I'm going to share my screen. And I think this is the one I want. That looks like it. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is being recorded, so don't say anything you don't want on YouTube. We're going to do introductions. And to do that, I'm going to quit sharing for a minute. And before I do that, has anybody not been on Zoom before? Everybody's been on Zoom at least once, right? So I know I got Dan Bicknell on for the first time yesterday, the day before. So That's good to have everybody up to speed. All right, so I'm Roger Rail. I'm chair of CARD and chair of Sci Residents for Safe Water, and this month ends my 27th year watching over the Paul Gilman dioxin contamination as a citizen volunteer. So I guess you can say I'm entering my 28th year because it's already September. Yeah. Yeah, it's a long time, and we've got a long ways to go. So I'm gonna go down the order that I see on my screen, and if you're muted, I want you to unmute. So Beth, you want to go next? You have to unmute.
Hi, I'm Beth Collins. I'm the secretary of CARD and a resident of Ann Arbor, living right next to First Sister Lake.
Dan Bicknell next, and then Vince after that.
Dan Bicknell, Global Environmental Alliance.
Vince, and then Jack Eaton.
Vince Caruso, board member of CARD and coordinating member for the Allen Creek Watershed Group.
Jack, and then Harvey Summers.
Jack Eaton, Ann Arbor City Council.
Okay, Harvey, and then
I haven't noticed any, but I was gonna mop and everything today.
Hey, Lamar, mute.
Harvey Summers, I'm a Sciow resident with 6 grandchildren in the area.
good for you. Patty McCall, and then Dan Hamill.
Patty McCall with Tetra Tech.
Okay, Dan.
Dan Hamill, the project manager for the Gelman site for EGLE.
And then Cynthia, and then Shannon.
Cynthia Price, an interested citizen.
Hi, I'm Shauna Milkey, a concerned resident of Ann Arbor.
And former secretary of CARD. Bob, and then Brian. Bob, you have to unmute. Bob, unmute.
Yeah, Bob Bailey, Sciow resident and environmental chemist who sold some of this stuff to Gelman.
Brian Nagel, Assistant Attorney General, assigned to this case.
Okay, Jim Schultz, and then Mary Miller.
Jim Schultz, CARD member and Ann Arbor resident, Sciow resident.
Mary Miller, the field operations manager for EGLE.
Okay. How come you're on a dark screen, Mary?
I don't have enough bandwidth to. I'm afraid I'll lose everybody. My internet will cut out.
To even put up a picture, really?
Nope. Well, I'll have to come up with a picture for next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Roger, this is Brian. Just gonna give you a heads up. I plan on turning my video off too, so I can get up and walk around and do stuff.
Well,
I can't just.
You can't sit still
this long. I'm on a bar stool.
That's not any different than the normal meetings, Brian. You know, you got to get up and stretch your back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we understand. We can look at the blank room. Jillian, and then Erica.
Jillian Carey, concerned Sciow Township resident.
Erica Briggs, I live in 5th Ward, 7th and Huron, incoming council member.
Colleen, and then Katie.
Colleen Lynn, PhD student at Wayne State.
Katie Jasitis from Congresswoman Dingell's office.
Eric and Kathy Knoll.
Eric Lipson, concerned citizen in Ann Arbor.
Kathy Knoll, Sciow Township trustee.
So Ann and Jeff.
Ann Bannister, outgoing Ward 1 Ann Arbor council member. And I also may do the save on the bandwidth and go to a dark screen for part of the meeting.
Jeff Hayner, Ward 1 City Council and CARD member.
Be quiet. Quiet.
Kathy Griswold, and then Patty.
Kathy Griswold, Ward 2. I represent the northeast side of town, but my constituents have been very, very concerned about water quality.
Patty McCall.
I already went, Roger. Patty McCall with Tetra Tech.
Oh, you know what happens? My screens get shifted around. In fact, Diane, you just jumped in. Why don't you go next?
I just added video, so sorry, that always bounces the screens around.
Yeah.
So I kind of messed you up.
No problem.
Diane O'Connell, Ann Arbor Township. I'm going to go off too, but I'm here.
She's the new Mike Moran. Okay, Kristen, then Bob Hyde.
Hi there, it's Kristen Schwayko from the Environmental Health Director with the Washtenaw County Health Department.
Bob Hyde, Scioto Township resident.
Jenny Kahn, and then Kathleen McDonald. Well, you already went, didn't you, Kathleen? Never mind. Jenny Kahn.
Jennifer Kahn, the public health engineer for the Washtenaw County Health.
Actually, I didn't go yet. This is Kathleen McDonald with the University of Michigan. I work with the Environment, Health, and Safety Department.
Oh, yeah, no. You see, this is why I need pictures. I'm not good with names. Evan's iPhone.
Hi, it's Evan. I'm walking around the township right now. I have a drop off at the discount tire place. Sorry about the background noise.
Okay, that was Evan Pratt. Lamar.
Lamar Weir, Congresswoman Dingell's office.
Welcome. And Kevin, the 517 number. Are you there? Kevin Lund. Well,
Kevin Lund is the geologist, hydrogeologist that assists me at the Gelman site for EGLE.
yeah, thank you, Dan, for filling in. All right, I think that's did I get everybody? Anybody jump out in the middle? That's everybody, right? Okay.
I just admitted John Reiser.
Okay.
And John, we're doing introductions.
Just in time, John. Introduce yourself. Where do you go?
Hello, this is John Reiser.
Okay.
Oh, hi, John. We were just doing introductions, so welcome.
It sounded like a car door slamming.
Welcome. I'm a Scioto Township resident.
Welcome, John. All right. How does it look there,
Okay,
Beth?
Roger, the next item is approval of the minutes for the board to vote on. Vince gave me a minor change I will make, and then do we have someone want to recommend that we approve the minutes for July?
Let me look at the chat. What's the change on the minutes?
To change under Bob's, I don't have them in front of me, so I'm going to have to
Minutes
do
suggest
that.
Bob's evaluation, 100 parts per billion.
Right.
Monitoring wells,
Right.
1,000. That's now 700 parts per billion. Okay, so it's just
Minor changes.
minor change. Okay. I'll move that we approve the minutes. Second.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Minutes are approved.
Thanks, Beth.
More chat. Okay. So go back to the share my screen. I really need a bigger monitor. So we'll go right into the old business for EGLE. Let's try to get through this as quick as we can. We don't need to take the whole 20 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, there's no real new updates. The trend analysis is still ongoing. Again, as I mentioned before, we're going to utilize trend analysis to when we generate the new monitoring plans for the eastern area, western area, and source area that are identified in the proposed CJ. So once the CJ is approved, new monitoring wells are installed during that process as we generate the monitoring plans to identify the frequency and in the time frame of sampling the monitoring wells. We will use a trend analysis to assist with that identification of the sampling of particular monitoring wells. So that's still ongoing. The status of the new compliance wells on Scioview development. If you remember, Gelman properly abandoned MW 63 S, I, and D on the property of the Scioview development area. In September 2019, those wells were not replaced. We have been waiting. So two of those wells, S and I, are listed as compliance monitoring wells under the current CJ. There will be compliance monitoring wells with the new CJ when that's approved. So we did not replace them well for well in similar locations. We'll wait for new wells to be installed at strategic locations, and then those we will evaluate what wells, old and new monitoring wells, will be utilized and identified as compliance monitoring wells in the western area once all the wells are installed. So we wanted to make sure we had good locations, for monitoring the new 7.2 criteria. The next one is update of the EGLE DHHS, adjusting VI numbers. I sent out Shane Morris's review of Bob Bailey's wet basement evaluation to the CARD group in the end of June. EGLE and DHHS are not planning on adjusting VI numbers at this point. VI screening number in groundwater at this point, but we will review any new information in the development of what's going to be likely site-specific VI screening criteria once new wells are installed and additional information is gathered for groundwater, shallow groundwater, and groundwater in the eastern area is the area that people are most questioning. So that.
Can I ask a question on that point?
Sure.
So is there going to be an official evaluation of Bob Bailey's write-up, detailed write-up on potential issues with home exposure, action level that he determined at 100 part per billion?
Well, like I said, Shane Morrison, there was a review by EGLE, RRD toxicologists. I sent that out to everybody in June. Right now, we are not going to do additional evaluation. We anticipating doing evaluation related to with additional information in groundwater or wet basements, and do some more site-specific VI screening criteria development. So that's where it stands right now. The next one is really, I'll skip over, it's really the city's Ann Arbor testing of wet basements. I'll move on to the next one. Again, DHH or EGLE will review any new information that's generated, that's generated by any wet basement sampling by Ann Arbor. Undoubtedly, we will get asked to review the results, and we'll plan to do that when that data is developed. Let's see, I think I skipped one here. The status of the Allen Creek Drain MS4 sampling. The EGLE Water Resources is still evaluating with Evan Pratt, still evaluating the response with Washtenaw County under what has been identified as a potential violation of the MS4 permit for the Allen Creek Drain. I believe they are working up a response to recent questions and concerns that have been brought forth to the Water Resources. So I would expect that they will be responding soon to those questions. That's really all I had. That's a different department from RD.
I make a quick comment on that.
Sure.
So I just want to make it clear that the last meeting there was discussion about levels at West Park. Evan Pratt made a comment that they're going up and down. Actually, the levels have gone up continuously. They haven't gone up and down. So they're last time they were tested at 22 part per billion. That's been quite a few months ago. I personally would like to see more testing done sooner than later. But to be clear, the levels have gone up continuously over the year since they started testing. I'm glad EGLE is doing those tests. And
I will interject here and repeat myself a little later. We will be, I have planned surface water sampling, which will include that West Park manhole and some other locations in the Allen Creek Drain for the, I'm going to start that surface water sampling the week of September 21st. So I have to coordinate with the city and county and with the appropriate people to get the manholes pulled up to assist. But that is on my schedule to start probably over those 2 weeks, last 2 weeks in September. That will include like I said, the Allen Creek Drain, but also the other surface water areas. And I'll update that a little later under the EGLE number 4 here. So,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
There's a swirl, as I recall, there's a swirl concentrator in West Park. Does it make any sense to test what's that in particular? I don't know.
Really, that's what we test. The results that Vince identified, the 22 parts per billion, that is, we open up a manhole right next to that swirl chamber, and that manhole accesses that swirl chamber. So we are testing right there. That is where we have been testing when we, with the data that we've provided for the last 2 years on the West Park sample.
That makes sense.
So that site has high groundwater flows. In my opinion, groundwater flows. Even during drought situations, are very high flows there. And I hope we'll see other testing on 8th Street, which has a similar situation where the groundwater seems to be seeping into a drain that's on 8th Street that has very high flows, very similar to West Park. It would be very easy to test that, and maybe Dan will take that up on.
Yeah, Vince, I have your, we're going to make an attempt to sample that 8th Street. It's not the manhole. We did a manhole right now.
Well, it's not a manhole, it's a street drain.
Yeah, it's a
inlet.
Yep.
I don't know.
So we are going to make an attempt. Again, I got to coordinate, can't just go popping off things. I will coordinate with the city.
Yeah, they're pretty heavy.
So we're going to attempt to get that at your request in the email you sent this summer. So that's on the list. And again, we will be doing surface waters too around, and I'll list those here coming up. One of the other ones, the wells that have not been sampled for a while, I had identified in our meeting 2 months ago that Gelman had sent me some data. I'd asked from out of their database what wells they have identified have not been sampled. And I'm still compiling that. It has been pretty hectic working remotely. Gelman is not my work in Hillsdale County, and I've had a couple of projects come up there. So I do not have a final list and reasons for wells that have not been sampled in a while. I'm still working on that.
So Dan,
Yes.
do you have to pre-approve when they stop sampling a well?
If it's in the monitoring plan, we have done that in the past. Wells like the ones that have been properly abandoned. I mean, you know, that's part of the process. I mean, they will not be sampled. There's not a well there now. But in the past, we have authorized with review of the monitoring plan changes. We have authorized wells to be sampled less and not be sampled. So that's what I want to make sure of. That was kind of, I don't want to get partial information out of our file. I want to make sure I have why the well is not being sampled if there is a reason. And if there isn't a reason, you know, and it's not being sampled, then get some information from Gelman.
Would that reason for not sampling it be recorded anywhere?
Yes. For example, some of them are identified in the old monitoring plans, 2011 vintage. And so you'll see in those monitoring plans tables that have, you know, that identifies that these wells will not be sampled. So yes, there is some documentation of that in the file. But I want to make sure, right, for all the wells that I got from Gelman, what the reasons were and when they were stopped sampling.
Yeah, but those tables might not be joined with the well and sampling tables in the database. So in order to find the reasons, you would have to wade through the different reports as you are doing.
Absolutely.
Rather than just
Absolutely.
click on a well and say, well, this was not sampled for this time period because ... And as we talk about having,
right.
we're talking about having samples, you know, this going on for many decades. If somebody new comes in and they want to look back and say, well, why this well wasn't sampled, they're never really going to be able to find it out very easily. It just seems like an easy thing
I don't
to
disagree with you. That's why it's been taking me longer.
Yes, and it's not right to have to take this long to get answers like that. Somebody made the decision. We don't know who, we don't know why. It's and we find it out after the fact. So that kind of overlaps with item A, lowercase d, the monitor well is not tested in many years. Like those are kind of it's not just deep wells, but there's some wells that haven't been tested in many years. And again, why are they not tested?
Right.
All right, well, thanks. Any discussion on this old business action items?
This is Evan. I had a note in the chat. I'm not sure if anybody's monitoring that. I was just wondering if there's a target date for that initial trend analysis to be wrapped up. I'm sorry if I've missed that, if that's been mentioned before.
No, I have not identified a date. Again, I have been relating it back to when the monitoring plans are gonna, you know, when are they gonna be, the drafts of those start to be generated. So
yeah,
we have not, I have
to
not.
my mind, to my mind, it would be beneficial to have a trend analysis before we are starting to work on the monitoring plans. You know what I mean? It seems like that's sort of an antecedent action item that you'd want to have done when you get into, hey, what's our monitoring plan look like? But I'll leave the comment at that.
Yeah,
I also haven't.
I had planned to do that. Again, we will be installing many, if the CJ is approved, many new monitoring wells. At that time, we were going to finalize, once that installation started, we were going to finalize the trend analysis evaluation of the old and be able to insert the new monitoring wells in that to develop, after those wells are installed, the new wells are installed, to develop the final monitoring plans.
Great. Well, it would be great if we can at some point identify a target date. Do you have an idea in mind when you might be able to share a target date for that analysis? You think by December you'd know?
Well, again, we have been working more on this, get the CJ, get everything get everything out for that. I had anticipated that there's going to be multiple discussions of the CJ coming up here in the short term. So I had not identified that. I probably realistically trying to work through the CJ and where we are. By the end of the first quarter next year is I think doable. I think anything prior to that, by the end of this year, again, I anticipate a lot of discussion about the current CJ, trying to get that finalized.
Dan, how many proposed wells are there, new monitoring wells are there in the CJ?
How many?
How many new monitoring wells?
There's going to be up to, there's about 14 to 16 locations identified in the eastern area, the western area, the source area, the 3 areas that are identified in the draft CJ. At each of those locations, there could be up to 3 monitoring wells at different depths, a shallow, intermediate zone, and a deep zone. So it's going to be dependent. Part of the process for monitoring well installation is they will do some vertical profiling, basically take groundwater samples of water-bearing zones as they drill the well and analyze those. And then based on that information, the geologic information, that the boring logs that were, the geologic materials that were encountered during drilling, determine where wells, what depths and how many wells will be set. So like I said, there's 14 to 16 locations. Most of those locations could have up to 3 wells, which currently it's similar to what is existing monitoring wells. A lot of the locations now that we're sampling have shallow, intermediate, and deep wells.
See, Dan?
Yes.
What you're seeing here on the screen is my Tableau Public mashup, one of them that shows parts per billion by date. And you can click on these wells. This is an open source. Anybody can access this. And if you choose this view of the wells, you can click on a well here and see what's been happening with that well over time. And you'll be able to make your own judgment. I'd like to code in which ones were in the trend analysis so we could separate those out, I guess. But when you have a well like this one here, it's kind of hard to see the trend because it bounces around and then it kind of stabilizes. I'll be going over this more later. This is a tool that decision makers can use as well as the general public to get an idea of what's going on at each well location. So let's go back.
Yeah, I have looked.
I still had.
I have looked at your current mashups and current information you've been sending out, Roger. I have not done a detailed analysis, but that'll be part of that information is available, and we'll take a look.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty easy tool to use once it's set up, and I think that way everybody's kind of on the same page. Regarding making, you look at you're seeing the same data, and so you can maybe come to the same conclusions. Because what we were seeing there was on a log scale. So you can show all wells and you can compare well to well without having the vertical axis change. I'm getting a warning here that my internet connection is unstable. So if I drop off, it may reboot automatically. If we somehow just lose connections, then I may have to restart the whole thing. But just warning everybody right now. Let's go. Are we done with discussion? Any more discussion on old business? Because we need to move on here.
Okay. I just want to make one comment on the MS4 violation. I think that is a serious issue that needs to be addressed, and we need to decide whether it's a violation. It is going up, and we haven't tested it recently, so we don't know what the numbers now. Yeah. But I do think that's a concern of ours that the Allen Creek is getting
that has not been resolved.
MS4 violation.
Let's move on. EGLE update.
I'm sorry, Roger. I wasn't done yet. I said I still had another comment. Is it okay?
Oh, sorry.
If I
go ahead.
Chime in here. Some other people have had an opportunity to speak multiple times.
Go ahead.
So trend analysis is important. You know, I think I've picked that up from you over the years, Roger. You've been doing trend analysis, and I'd like to respectfully disagree with Vince's correction of my comments. The trend line is probably a difficult one to chart a little bit because there's not many data points as far as the Allen Creek pipe. But what we have, and I know it's hard to follow without a picture, but we had 4 in 2017. We had 19 in 2018. In February of 19, it was 15. In March, it was 19 again. In April, it was 17. In May, it was 16. In June, it was back down to 15. And Vince is correct that the most recent reading was 22 in July. But I think if you, I think a data scientist might call this chatter. And let's remember that there's a reasonable amount of error in this type of sampling. These are not precision numbers. This is not a calculation where
is this the data we're looking at here?
And it's going to equal 4 every time.
Look at your screen. Is this?
I don't know, Roger. I'm not able. I'm not able to be on the screen, so Dan could tell you if that's the data.
Allen Creek, West Park.
Yeah, I'm still walking around here. I'm still walking back to my office here.
Yeah, but that's the one we're talking about, right?
But
this little bubble, this little.
It looks.
Yeah. So
it looks like it.
Yeah.
I don't disagree that it's important. I just want to make sure that we don't state things that are not accurate.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, it's hard to distinguish a trend in this little bubble right here.
Yeah, we absolutely need more sampling. That is absolutely correct.
We do have a earlier reading here that if you take this and that bubble, then clearly there's a trend, but I don't trust that trend. I think there's too much variation of water going into the drain to change those values. It's not like taking readings in groundwater where there's less input and output. The drain is going in and out all the time.
I do appreciate Dan Hamill trying to do these tests during dry spells, which we asked for and he agreed with. I do think the trend is definitely up on this, and that's just my opinion. And 22 is, you know, a high number, and who knows what it is now because we haven't had tests for months.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to do a good trend, you need to
have longitudinal
readings. Let's move on.
Well, I have a question though. When are we going to talk about what the CJ has in it about the Allen Creek Drain going into the Huron River, and later or now?
Yeah, we may not even get to it by the way things are going. We need to get through the basic part of the agenda, and we won't be able to go into detail, like I said earlier, in a lot of the CJ changes because it was released yesterday, and here we are trying to talk about it without having read it carefully and having all the backup documents.
We may need another meeting.
Well, that's one of the things I will interject here is that we probably will have a couple special meetings before the September 14th meeting, and as well as some side discussions for subtopics. So be prepared for that and submit your, as you come across something in reading the CJ materials, we need to have a way to post what those concerns are and maybe have subgroups around certain concerns. I can't imagine all of us being in all the meetings, even though I probably will be. This compressed time is very stressful. So I want to get through our normal stuff as quickly as we can. So unless there's a really urgent thing to discuss old business, I want to go on to Dan's updates. Go ahead, Dan.
Yes, can you hear me, Roger?
I can hear you.
Okay. Under the updates, the NPD, yes, I checked with the water resources. There's no new information. They're still in the permit renewal process, the internal review. Like I said, once that's completed, until that's done, we are under the old 2014 NPDES permit limits. The next step for them is discussing it with Gelman, the draft permit. I don't have any time frame when that will occur. And then once that is done, a discussion with Gelman by Water Resources, they will post it, the draft permit, post it. And then as you have requested, they will be planning to do a public meeting on that new permit. So again, I did, every time before these meetings, I check with Water Resources to make sure if there's any updates I can present. Again, they are in the same, they are still internal review on that permit. The homeowner well sampling, Jenny was able to complete. In fact, it probably will be, if Jenny's on, or Kristen, maybe you could give an update about that. I can, about the homeowner well sampling. I know there were several of the wells that are sampled twice. I don't know the status of those.
Yep.
So Jenny,
Yep. We in June were able to collect 177 out of 187 samples and send those for testing. The only detections were on the south side of Elizabeth Road in wells with previous detections. And all 3 wells were at 2 parts per billion. The home on Breezewood was non-detect. And then we went out for our second round of sampling just last week. I finished that up. So we went down Elizabeth again, into the daycare in Dexter, Ann Arbor. Those are all sampled twice per year. And then I went back to the 10 properties we couldn't get the first round and tried to resample those. I probably got about half this time of those. So we'll have a few more data points to fill in there.
And again, those are with the older sampling method, not the EPA 522, correct?
correct. That's with the lab method that the EGLE uses. The EGLE lab does the analysis is 8260 SIM analysis. The detection level is 1 part per billion.
Right. Surface water testing.
Yes, as I said, I plan on starting that the week of the 21st. We will be doing all the surface waters that we've done in the past. Allen Creek Drain, the Little Lake, First Sister Lake, Second Sister Lake, Third Sister Lake, Smith Ponds, the different tributaries of Honey Creek at Jackson Road, Park Road. We're going to do the Gelman outfall discharged area and just upstream, just immediately upstream. We'll do right at the outfall of the Gelman system, and then upstream a little bit toward the marshy area. We will do Honey Creek itself at Dexter. We're going to try to do the Honey Creek at Miller Road. We haven't done that. We've skipped over that in the past. We'll do the Honey Creek Huron River HCHR in our database Confluence. We will do the
Hey, Dan, just let me interrupt for a second here.
Yes.
You said Honey Creek at Miller Road. You should be aware that once they get the roundabout done, they're going to be working on that bridge. And there's probably going to be a lot of silt and other things going on in the creek right there, starting probably into September into October.
Okay. We're going to attempt it. We'll see what the site conditions will allow us to do, and then note any specific at this time of sampling, any specific physical properties that you notice, like you said, sediment, a lot of sediment in the sample. We'll be sampling the Huron River off the North Maple Ridge Road Bridge, like we've done in the past. The Honey Creek at West Huron Drive there, that intersection. The West Park Pond again, some of these we've just done in the past in the Hannah Nature area. So, and then we will, like I said, do some of the Allen Creek drain locations, including the one on 8th Street, attempt that. And we'll see where it goes.
And all those locations are.
I should have data.
All those locations, except maybe not the Miller one, are already in the database as far as the well, the sampling location. Correct?
Yes, and yes, and the one on 8th Street there, the storm sewer grate. That's kind of a new one. We did the storm sewer or the Allen Creek drain, the manhole, which was a deeper sample right there next to the school. What Vince is talking about, if I understand it right, is the grate right next to the school there, the shallow pipe, and that he has noticed a lot of flow all the time going through that. So we'll take a look. So that would be a new spot, not in the current database.
Okay. And for the Honey Creek sampling, the company had been sampling here in the river when they should be sampling here for bromate. Do you know if that's changing? I guess this is where you're actually sampling. No. They're still sampling here for bromate?
Right. Yes.
Because I thought the agreement with the city said they should be sampling here. It actually shows it on the map that it should be here. So you haven't.
Roger, I sample at the base for dioxane right there.
Right, and that they should be sampling for bromate here too, shouldn't they? Shouldn't they be sampling for bromate here, according to the agreement with the city?
The agreement with the city was changed, related to the access and the physical access to locations. That bridge was not identified. What the HCHR confluence would be along Honey Creek there, right there, and that access had some problems to get there, and Gelman had identified that they will be sampling downstream of that. So I don't know that has changed.
Excuse me, can I add in a second? I walked down there this spring, and I don't see the access issue, and I don't see how it can be defensible to sample further down in the river where there is so much dilution that you have no idea of how much bromate would be in Honey Creek. So to me, it makes no sense and seems like a waste of time. Is it possible for you to look into that and check that out? Because I can walk down there, so I don't see how anybody else would be unable to do so.
And actually, Sue, sampling here would not be very good either, because there's backwash from the river. It'll already be diluted. If you put it at the actual mouth of Honey Creek, would be back up here next to the bridge where Dan is already sampling. That's where they should be sampling for bromate.
And bromate's a major issue for the city of Ann Arbor because it's already a high number. It's a number that they're keeping down, but it's an issue in the city already, and now this adds to that problem, and it needs to be addressed. And I think maybe city council members can address that at a city council meeting too.
Well, it's actually more than that, Vince. If this wasn't discussed as part of the CJ and all these 3 years of discussions, why wasn't bromate issues? I didn't see anything about bromate in the discussions in what I've read so far. And here we've been talking about it for many, many months, and it still wasn't included in what was released to the public. So it's like no communication from concerns that we brought out there, completely valid, that affect violations of agreements with the city that still did not make it in to the materials that were released.
Roger, why is bromate a concern?
I'm sorry, Vince.
Why is bromate a concern? Why don't you?
Well, because
explain
it's a carcinogen and it doesn't occur in nature. It's only there because they're using a not best available technology. You're using ozone oxidation instead of UV oxidation.
And so the city of Ann Arbor has trouble keeping that number down. They have been successful. This adds more bromate, which is problematic for the city and the environment. Let's face it, it's going into the environment.
Yeah, it should. There's no reason that other than that it saves the company half of their treatment cost. That's basically it.
And Danaher uses the other more expensive treatment often to remove dioxane from water, and they choose not to at this site.
Well, that's because they have Danaher has a subsidiary, Trojan UV, that has one of the better UV oxidation systems that can treat to non-detect. But of course, when somebody else is paying when they use those systems, Danaher is not paying. But it seems to be, it would be in Danaher's marketing interest to use their own subsidiaries' equipment to do the best available job instead of using a not quite as good and one that creates a new carcinogen in their effluent.
Multi-billion-dollar Danaher. Multi-billion-dollar Danaher.
They wouldn't give us a discount on the Trojan system for the wastewater treatment plant. That's what we're using there.
Really?
Yeah. It's not scaled fully, or I'm sorry, not wastewater treatment, water treatment for the state mandated cryptosporidium removal.
You know, if you're a company and you've got a water treatment system, UV water treatment system, and you want to tweak it, make it best, you need a good test site to test out your equipment before you market it to the whole world. Here is the mother of all dioxane contaminations. It's not mixed up with other stuff. And they're missing an opportunity to help with their own marketing. Anyway, that's part of my rant. Let me go back and share the agenda again. Share screen, agenda. Share. All right, so that was item 4. So this 9/14 meeting is the next item, right, Dan? The new CJ and the public meeting on September 14th, which I only discovered after reading through things last night. I'm sorry, I stepped on you. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can discuss that if you like. I want to make it clear that, Roger, in your emails last night and maybe this morning, you kind of identified, you know, that this thing popped up. Well, this was that meeting was scheduled. The release, an identification of the meeting was related to when the confidentiality agreement of the CJ was lifted, which was lifted yesterday morning, mid-morning. And so we posted the public meeting. We had planned to do a public meeting to accept comments on the draft CJ, compile comments, answer the comments and any questions. And so it wasn't just a surprise. We did not identify that until after the confidentiality agreement was lifted. So what EGLE was planning on doing is having a Zoom public meeting. It went out, if you're on the EGLE, the Gelman listserv, you got a notice. If you didn't, I also posted it under the Gelman webpage under the public comment and meeting schedules tab, which is lower on the page. And it basically has a notice about the meeting. It has a way to register for the meeting and has the format identified for the meeting. We will be basically doing some introduction, a summary of the CJ, and then we will open it up for comments and questions to the public. The meeting will be recorded. There'll be no back and forth exchange or answering of the questions that night. Basically, we are giving the public an opportunity to make comments about the draft CJ and ask questions. We will compile a response, question and answer response document with all comments and questions. And after the meeting is done, and send that, make that available as has been done at other public meetings similar to this. So that is on September 14th. That's a Tuesday. It is from 6 to 8 p.m. And like I said, the majority of the meeting will be open for public comment. There'll be a shorter summary. I will be presenting a summary on information, about the CJ, and it's a very brief summary, just highlighting the high points. And then the meeting will be open for people to make comment.
And Roger, this is Brian. I want to jump in for a moment too to tell you about, or to discuss what we're going to do about as far as the comments received. We'll compile those and we'll have responses to those. And we'll provide those to the judge at the time when we are hopefully moving for entry of the consent judgment, so that they will be available for the judge to review in making his decision and whether to enter the consent judgment.
The comment period began yesterday, really. As the notice identifies, you can make comments in several ways. You can basically do it. There's an email address, so you can do an email with comments and questions. It is not my email address. It's a separate email address that's been set up. You can write your comments and questions to me, address it to me at the Jackson District Office. That address is provided in that notice. And then you also have the meeting. Like I said, the meeting will be open for public comment and questions during the Zoom meeting.
Dan, how does this
again?
Dan, how does this 21-day comment period compare with past meetings of this type?
It's, as far as what I know, it's within the brackets of what, within the time frame of what other meetings have been. Basically, the CJ is out as of yesterday. We gave 2 weeks to review and start posting comments. We have our meeting, and then another week after that to finalize and submit any comments or questions. So that's
it's relatively let me jump in again too. I think it's relatively consistent with the ones that I've seen. I don't have at the tip of my fingers the last time we did that, what the time frames were for the Wolverine Worldwide consent decree, out on the west side of the state with PFAS issues. I actually, off the top of my head, it feels like that one might have even been more compressed than this one. But it's basically a 3-week period for people to get comments in. As somebody who's going to be, working on responses and the summary, I'd like to encourage people to do written comments. If you want to give both oral and written, that'd be fantastic. But again, I think, written comments are a great thing.
It makes it a lot easier for us.
Can I ask a question about just the timeline for those of us that don't know? When does then it go to our elected officials for voting on it, and when do we get to do public comment for them? And
Roger, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I checked. This is just the state's process. Each of the interveners are free to have their own public hearing, and the city intends to have an individual separate public hearing to take statements. And so we have not yet scheduled that, and we will be discussing the process going forward. We just wanted to get this information out as broadly as possible so people can start looking at it. But each intervener can have their own public hearing. The city intends to have one, and we'll be announcing the date on that at some subsequent point.
This is Sue Schenk from the county, and it's the same is true of Washtenaw County. We weren't exactly sure what day everything was going to be released, so we haven't actually scheduled anything. We are not bound by any 21-day comment period ourselves. We can take as long as we and the public need to make a decision on this.
Well, the reason I brought this up is what happens if during the local jurisdiction meetings, something comes up that should have been commented on at the EGLE, and the EGLE's time period is already expired. Seems like the EGLE's time period should be encompassing all of the local government hearings.
Because nothing can be changed once EGLE has their meeting and makes their decision. Is that correct? So I'm still confused. We have till October 22nd for the next court hearing. But what does that mean for, will a decision be made on October 22nd or prior to that, or?
What I'm getting a feeling of is that the decision, it's somebody's thinking the decision's already made and we're just going through the motions to take public comment and write up answers, but that the decision somewhere has already been made. That's what it seems like, that the public comments may not have any bearing. I would point out that the time period for this site may be longer than your typical site because of the history of the site, the heavy citizen involvement and knowledge of local of the citizens, and how we're doing some of the work that the regulators and the consultants and the even the companies is doing, and that it might take a little bit longer to get all of our concerns into the decision stream. That's my take on this, is that we've been cut out of the decisions for 3+ years. Inputs that we mentioned during card meetings weren't all incorporated into the materials that's been made public. It seems like somebody was slow walking it for a long time and now they're fast walking it. And I'm really concerned about that whether or not it's going to be a good process is going to be called into question because of the timing on all this.
Well, this is Mary Miller with EGLE. You have to understand too that it's going to take some time for EGLE staff to go through every single comment and address the comments and have it be presentable to the judge when the time comes. So I think our timeline is adequate for this.
I appreciate that, but I also appreciate that it's going to take those of us that are citizen volunteers. We're not being paid to do this, and we have to give up a lot of our family time and Zoom time with grandchildren and things like that to take care of this in a compressed time frame and do it over and over and over again because it's going to be in each jurisdiction. I'm just saying that's.
Yeah, I can appreciate that as well, Roger.
Yeah.
If I can, this is Sue. I want to be careful about what I say. I guess I'm going to to say that from my personal perspective, I see this process as kind of a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I'm not sure how much modification within what's been proposed is going to happen going forward. And I'm not saying that I like almost anything about this process. I'm not going to say that. I don't think that this is a good way to make this happen, but we're very constrained by what has happened in the past. And so I think everybody should push as hard in whatever direction they feel like they want to push. And you know, and at the same time recognizing that this whole situation is suboptimal.
Thanks.
This is Erica Briggs. I was curious, is it preferable that from EGLE's perspective that there's overlap with the public meetings with the city and the county to have that public comment be transmitted around through the same time period?
I don't know how actually we could do that at this point. You know, we've already announced our schedule. You know, the 3 intervener local governments don't have a schedule announced yet. You know, it will take, you know, however long it takes for the, you know, the 3 municipalities to work through their process. And yeah, there's things might be, you know, raised sooner or later, or, you know, but I think at the end, all the individual parties will make decisions based upon, you know, what their feedback from constituents and feedback from non-constituents, you know, whatever. Yeah, my understanding is that it's an up or down vote of whether an individual intervener you know, agrees to, you know, enter into the consent judgment or, you know, approve the consent judgment revisions, enter into the related documents that are part of that process.
So nothing can be changed.
I don't want to give anybody an idea that something can be changed, because, you know, it's taken us 3.5 years to get this far. It's a you know, to reopen these negotiations,
It's been drug out for a long time. I will remind everybody, when I first got involved 27 years ago, one of the first things we did as citizens was recognize that Gelman Science was an important company employer in the area. And to find out more about how the company works, we each bought a few shares so we could go to their stockholder meeting, their shareholder meeting in December of 1994. And we asked some questions, the 3 of us who attended. And apparently that those questions raised some concerns within the company. And the next May, I got a call at work from Kim Davis, who was the president at that time of Gelman Sciences, who had just been put in charge of the cleanup, because as he put it, this is starting to affect my business. His business was to help the company become a professionally run company and continue growth instead of bouncing up and down. So I said, that's fine. We can meet, but it can't be just me. It has to be all of the stakeholders. And we got all the stakeholder representatives together. We'd meet monthly with Kim Davis. And within several months, without any lawyers involved, we came to an agreement about how the discharge was going to be run and some issues about sampling. It certainly wasn't as detailed as what we have now, but within a few months, we had an agreement. One of them, there was supposed to be 3 parts to that agreement with the township to approve the mega grant to stay in Michigan and not move to Florida. The other two were going to be a change in the consent judgment and a change to the permit. Those last two never got done. And then in the spring of 1996, as all this was being put into place, Chuck Gelman took control of the cleanup back away from Kim Davis. There was a big brouhaha within the company. They had to have an outside negotiator come in and calm things down. And Chuck Gelman reneged on the agreement. We did that in secret. We didn't find out till 6 months later when at the time DEQ provided the idea for a permit that Chuck and whoever was working with him at that time that reneged on the agreement that we had with Kim Davis and with that they had signed with Scioto Township. So when it takes 3 years to do something, that means that somebody is slowing it down. They really don't want this to proceed. And I think everybody is aware of that now, that this company is not interested in doing a full and proper cleanup, and is probably pushing for a quick approval of this new settlement without having a lot of citizen input. And there may be people in officials that would just as soon that happen too, because it takes time away from their other duties. But we're talking about decisions that are going to affect many, many decades into the future. And I did not see anything in any of the materials that were released that talks about the time frame that's expected. Larry Lemke mentioned that, well, these things tend to, you do purging, it tends to flatten off, and it goes on, but he didn't say how far. And I think that is a major deficiency in what I've seen so far. I'm going to have more to say after I read and study the materials more as I find time, but I don't think everybody
Roger,
has the same goal in mind here.
Roger,
I've got a comment too.
This is Dan Bicknell.
Yes.
Hi, Roger. I've got a question for Dan Hamill. I took a quick look at all of the exhibits, Dan. Is there one exhibit that shows where the new monitoring wells will be located on a map, please?
Yes, there's, I think, it's attachment G, I think, but I don't have it in front of me.
I do.
Attachment G sounds right to me too.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And it's on Larry Lemke's, he covers a little bit too in one of his videos. What I don't see are a lot of the data that supports that. Go ahead.
Okay, couple questions. First of all, SCIO will also be holding a public hearing. It has not been scheduled yet. Brian Nagel, do you think there's an option for EGLE to extend their public comment period to give people more time? This doesn't necessarily mean any additional negotiations. It would just mean extension of the current 21-day public comment period.
We'll have to talk about that internally. I can also see the option of basically, hanging on to, what we have until everybody else has finished their comments periods, and looking at what we have and incorporating, any responses to those comments too. But we'll have to discuss that internally.
Right. There doesn't seem to be any reason that EGLE can't incorporate the other public entity comments into their comments. It just they just end their public process on that date.
Right. Yeah. No, it's something we'll have to discuss. Which, and I assume we would have an answer to that by the time of our meeting.
Here's the map overlay, by the way, of where the extra sampling locations are proposed. These are just general areas.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Dan, are they talking about which system for remediation are they talking about using? Which the UV or the other system?
The ozone.
The ozone system. Thank you.
Yeah. Which is it, Dan?
They're currently identified. They use their current system, which is the chemical oxidation, ozone, and hydrogen peroxide.
And there's been no mention of bromate in that settlement agreement?
The bromate is handled. Bromate is handled under the NPDES permit, which is part of the requirement to utilize and discharge to the unnamed trib, the treatment system that they're using. So the new permit, or the current permit, and the new permit we're anticipating is where the bromate concentrations are identified that the system has to meet.
Hey, Dan, what about the new treatment that's going to be for these locations that's going to proposing to dump into the First Sister Lake? Is that going to be counted as the tributary?
No. Some of the options that were identified in the CJ are for the temporary treatment system that will be is proposed for the Park Lake well remediation area, is put it into the sewer, the city of Ann Arbor's sewer system, or with an NPDES permit for a second NPDES, or in the same permit with an added on discharge to put it into First Sister Lake there.
Wait a minute, I'm confused. You said it's going to be in the sewer system, then you said it's going to be in the First Sister Lake. Which is it?
I believe the CJ identifies as the options for discharge could be the sewer system or the First Sister Lake as under an NPDES permit.
Okay, let's say it's the First Sister Lake. How is that not part of the tributary?
It is. We don't disagree with that. It does end up into the
right, because
right. I'm sorry.
First Sister Lake.
I separated the two of the western area and east area, and the outfall area is the unnamed trib starting there. So
yeah, because both of those sister lakes feed into the tributary upstream from.
Where is the data of how this is gonna impact the First Sister Lake and even Park Lake Road, with a 100-year storm event being discharged into the lake approximately every day?
Well, that will be part
of discharge water, 5 inches into the lake every day.
That would be part of Gelman's NPDES permit application.
But this is a standing body of water. How can you do that? And it's non-detect. Why would you let them pollute a natural lake that has human and animal contact with a discharge of 7.2? And where is the data behind this? Why can't we see, where's the flood analysis? Where's the contingency plan? Where's the study? And why can't the public be privy to this?
The application hasn't been made yet. It's that, no application's been made yet. But I imagine that those are issues that can be brought up as part of that permit review.
But not changed, just brought up. Nothing can be
Well,
changed.
no, I mean, those, EGLE's WR Water Resources Division would take those into account in whether the application, or what sort of limitations would be on the permit as far as the discharge.
Okay, idea. I just want to know.
Hey, Brian, do you think,
the lawyer?
Brian, do you think Gelman has actually done a study on this and just hasn't released it to you?
I'm not aware of one.
What about the study for the core area where Larry Lemke in his video reveals that yes, there was a soils investigation at the site and also included in the marsh area where we brought that up over and over again at CARD meetings, asking where is the study, where's the data for these samples that they were clearly doing based on aerial photographs that we saw and for permits that were pulled with the county, that there was soil sampling at the core and that there was some kind of sampling or investigation being done in the marshy area. Why aren't those reports released along with all this other documentation for this proposal? Shouldn't that be part of what we get to review within this compressed 21 days?
Unfortunately, yeah, those are still part of, under the confidentiality order.
Well, that's crazy.
I have raised the question with Gelman, and we're in the process of trying to address that.
Why don't we just dismiss this out of
Best I can
hand?
say. Pardon me?
Why don't we just dismiss this idea, this settlement out of hand, because we're not getting cooperation from the company.
What a shock.
We're getting played.
Yeah, we've asked for the soil data for decades. We've had public meetings with the DEQ and asked for soil information, and we were denied for decades.
This isn't the first time that reports have been delayed or withheld. We've even had cutoffs of data. Fortunately, we still have that, even though it has to be reconstituted every month by the DEQ, which takes Dan some time. So we, for instance, we still don't have June sampling database. And here we are in September. So,
I have a question, since this is in the city of Ann Arbor and it's in an Ann Arbor Natural Park area, will the city staff be evaluating this for their recommendation, or what? How are we, since nobody evaluated this, what's gonna, I don't understand I don't understand how lawyers and elected officials can decide that this is a good idea and there's no data or studies to back it. And now who's gonna look out for the human beings that live here?
I'm going to suggest that these are good questions for the public hearings that will be coming up.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
I don't think that anything's going to be decided here today. So I understand your frustration. You have to recognize that the proposed consent judgment is the result of negotiations, and this is what the attorneys feel is the best they could do under the circumstances, and now we get to comment on it and decide yes or no whether this pleases the public.
Thank you, Councilmember Eaton.
Roger, I see that I'm next on the agenda, and I was going to cede yield my time to one common block of discussion here because we're all talking about the same thing now. But I'd just like to preface wherever we go with this conversation with a couple comments. One, it's not so that topics that of concern for CARD were not passed into this negotiation. Believe me, they were. What was done with them is not for my discussion because I wasn't always there. And I think what I'm hoping for, and I think I could maybe speak for some of my council colleagues, is that we are well aware that the expertise exists outside of the negotiating table that was active for the last 3-some years, and that the outcomes might not be as, in my consideration, might not be as properly informed as I would like them to be. And so the any kind of public input now that, I mean, this is released, partially released, is considering that we all consent to this notion that we agree somehow that this is a good solution. I agree that the public needs to see this and tell me if it is indeed a good solution. I have my own feelings about it, of course, as do others. But I think the hustle from my perspective was to get it to this place where it can be seen by everybody else, so we can actually take this very real input that I really want from everybody here at CARD and everywhere else in the community and wherever else they might be, to better inform what we're going to do next. Not just our up or down vote, but why we might say up or down on this, why we might consider, hey, if we don't like these parts of it, here's why. And the judge needs to know that. The judge has also talked about having his own public hearing in his courtroom. And so to get it open is already a victory for me, that you guys can see what
Jeff, do you
going
think,
on.
Jeff, do you think the judge could order that these withheld reports, studies be made public?
Excuse me, Roger. Do you mean the content of the negotiations?
Not the content of negotiations. I'm talking about
the
Gelman's
missing.
studies of their dioxane in our waters of the state or our soils of the state that are on their property and on the property they had to buy in the marshy area. Could the judge force the company to release those secret reports?
I think that
Roger, let me just jump in.
Yeah.
It'd be much easier for me to just get them.
Okay.
Why don't we go that route?
Yeah,
Yeah,
can we
Brian.
get them like, I don't know, it's almost noon. How about 6 o'clock?
I was going to say, I think that you should ask for them, and I think that if the judge was aware, as this process goes forward, that there were things that we felt were missing, I think it would be totally appropriate to make him very aware of that.
Yeah, Brian, and to that end, this is Dan Bicknell. You all identify that there are going to be source areas of concern on the site that will require treatment. Does this data support the delineation of those areas? And if so, maybe that is the reason the information should be provided.
Yeah, and it's not just the area, it's probably also what else is there. DMF, dimethylformamide, is it, Dan?
Well, the idea is that they've delineated what they believe to be on the site areas that will require treatment. And if so, they should provide the data that supports the rationale for those areas which are delineated in an attachment to the consent judgment. So Brian, that would be justification for.
No, I totally understand. It was in the rush, I would say, it, obviously was a bit of an oversight.
So Brian, do you know when those reports were completed?
Not off the top of my head. What we have seen are not reports. We've just seen data.
Okay. Does it have dates on it? Any dates on any of that data?
Roger, I can't tell you off the top of my head. But I'd actually started this discussion a little bit ago about, about this data needs to come out. So I will resume that discussion with Gelman, and we will get it.
Thank you.
And we will get it. That's great.
Yeah, soon?
Hopefully.
Don't say hopefully.
I can't promise you for today or tomorrow, but.
Let's put a limit on it.
We don't have to wait for the post office to deliver it?
As long as it's not in 22 days.
No, it'll be 20 days. So we have a chance to review it before the deadline. Yeah, this. I feel like I'm in a Kafka novel. Well, a lot of things here on the agenda, on my part, we've already discussed. The data review, I kind of pointed out where the new CJ locations were on maps. What I've asked for from a few of the people who should know, when there is a map that provided in those materials, and there's a layer on that map that shows the expanded prohibition zone, the possible sample locations, other things like that. I would like I requested those layers be exported separately, preferably as a KMZ or KML, so I can plop them right into Google Earth without having to overlay it, trace it by hand as approximately where it is. There's no reason that we can't do data interchange, geographic data interchange electronically. And maybe it'd have to be a shape file or a geocoded PDF, but why isn't, and apparently that's something we've been asking for years too, and there's no mention of anything like that to keep the public informed, to help decision makers, local government decision makers, as well as EGLE decision makers have the tools they need to evaluate the data as it comes in and to evaluate these proposals. So that's really upsetting that that isn't already being done. As far as next steps, I would hope that the local governments work together. I can see that if they're going to be separate public hearings, there's going to be a lot of redundancy, and that's going to waste people's time who have to be at each of these meetings. If there was some way to do it in series as a joint thing, we've had a few special joint meetings of jurisdictions before, we can have the same amount of time being used, but maybe somehow divide it up so that all of the details that need to be covered get covered at the same time with all jurisdictions, just as a thought. I don't know if anybody.
Roger, this is Dan. I actually kind of like that each individual intervener will be allowed to look at issues that are pertinent to them, rather than have it all coagulated into one small meeting or large.
There is that argument, yes.
I would prefer it actually separate.
Any citizen can go to any of those meetings and talk about a new item and get 6 minutes instead of just 2 minutes.
Well, they have to decide what they're going to be having as public comment periods.
Right.
And
It's
things
going to
like
be
that,
difficult.
but I would prefer them to be individual rather than collective, please.
Yeah.
Just another thought.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be also good if there was some kind of feedback for the written comments, because the written comments are going to have a lot more details, and to have answers to the written comments and then have comments again, kind of like a dialogue of whether the response to the written comments was adequate. Because we've seen that in the past on this site where there have been some written comments that kind of gloss over some of the important details, and we never do get a proper response, as if the person reviewing it doesn't fully understand the issue. So I think sometimes if there's a way to do dialogue like that, we might end up with a better result. Anything else, Dan? Dan Bicknell?
No, I just think that the more opportunities that the public has for public input, the better. And I think by having these different intervener meetings, public meetings would be best, rather than having one large.
Oh, I wasn't proposing one large meeting. I was proposing the same amount of time, like 3 separate meetings, but if there was a way to divide it up by topic, because that should cut down some of the redundancy. But again, it's up to the,
redundancy is not going to hurt, I think, in this case.
unless it takes all the time, and then there's some of the other less. There's some really important hidden issues that don't get discussed. You're right in that it probably, I mean, there almost has to be separate by jurisdiction so they can schedule it, because otherwise not everybody's going to be able to be there. So I'll defer to that.
I have another question.
Yeah.
What happens if SCIO accepts and Ann Arbor rejects? Or, some variation there when you get some combination of jurisdictions accepting and rejecting. Does the consent judgment address
Do you
that?
want to answer that? We all have our own settlement agreements. The consent judgment is one thing, and the consent agreement is one thing, and the settlement are different. But perhaps Jack could answer better.
I'm going to try to be careful here. First, you have to understand that there are 3 documents. There's the consent judgment, there's a settlement agreement, and then there's the order of dismissal. And so each entity will vote on each of those items as it pertains to them. Each intervener has its own settlement agreement. So our settlement agreement is a little worse than, say, the settlement agreement for the township. So there's first the question of what happens if some of those documents are accepted and others are not. But then also the whole issue of if one entity accepts the consented judgment and another doesn't, what's the impact of that? And that's an interesting question that I don't have an answer to. But it all goes in front of the judge, and he decides whether to enter the consent judgment over the protests of one or more of the interveners. I think it's pretty clear that the state will sign on to this. They negotiated this with our assistance. So that will be the matter for the judge to decide how to handle the possibility that some entities don't buy into the consent judgment. So I don't have an answer for you, Eric.
Do the interveners have to have unanimous votes, like city council unanimous, or is it just majority?
It was our intention in the beginning that we wanted to seek a unanimous path. I don't know whether that's still out there as a possibility or not.
Will this all be complete by October 22nd? Is that, he decides on the 22nd, Judge Connors?
I don't know. I believe that that's what our aim is to go in front of the judge with some sort of decision from each one of the interveners. But if you've been paying attention to this litigation for the last 30 years, the only consistency is delay. So I don't know, but certainly if it doesn't happen on October 21st, then, for example, with city council, it gets bumped into the next sitting council, which will have 5 brand new members, which will further complicate issues in front of the council.
Yeah.
Did I answer everything that you thought I should answer, Jeff?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Jeff, you had an item here about discharge into the First Sister Lake and that being a...
Well, it really leaps out of this public material that there's a notion that additional cleanup efforts will be discarded into a pristine body of water, which is just so wrong by my reckoning. I can't even tell you how offensive that is to me. And so I when I talked to Beth to get a little time slot on here, because I knew we wanted to talk about this, I said, well, that's a big concern of mine. And I guess I wanted some input from folks in the know about, would there be a better option for this so we could make a recommendation as part of the public comment that, you know, re-injection or putting it elsewhere, or building a pipeline to put it someplace else, or, you know, or treating to non-detect before dumping it into a pristine body of water. And so I guess my questions are a couple. One, what would we recommend would be a better a method of disposal? And two, how is it that EGLE is considering that this is a reasonable discharge method? Is it because it's under the criteria, it's going to be discharged under a certain level, above non-detect, but under a certain level? Or how is it that EGLE is on board with polluting a unpolluted body of water?
That's the NPDES permitting process. You know, the practical reality is there are, I don't know, probably thousands of NPDES discharge permits in the state of Michigan. That, you know, it does involve some level of, you know, putting something other than distilled water into a, you know, otherwise clean water body.
Well, for this site, we know
Clean Water Act is that way. You know?
Even for this site, we know they've done this in the past where they've treated to non-detect using the best available technology, UV oxidation, before they could re-inject into an uncontaminated aquifer. They did that for years at Evergreen. They could do that again here, in fact, using their own subsidiaries' technology, and prove it, you know, and use it for marketing purposes. And then if they, you know, if it's causing a little bit more flooding in the first sister lake, maybe part of it can go to the storm sewer when it's not flood conditions, and, you know, dispose of part of it that way, because it'll be non-detect. You know, it's kind of a no-brainer to me. Just, you know, do the best you can. You have the technology. Instead of trying to cut, you know, minimize the cost and cause consternation, and maybe even not even, they're trying to have an excuse not to pump and treat from these high concentration areas that are heading toward Evergreen and beyond. And
well, the
don't need to give them an excuse to not do that.
Yeah, Roger, the technology that Gelman is proposing to use is technology they already have in their possession. And, you know, it's the, you know, the treatment system that portable treatment.
Yeah, but Brian, how are they going to get the water?
No, I'm just
how are they going to get the water from those purge areas back to the core and then back to the first sister lake? Why would they put it in the first sister lake then? Why didn't they put it in the discharge point that they're doing already?
Right, and we already have a pipeline from Evergreen that goes right by First Sister Lake.
There must be something more there that they're not telling you.
Well, my understanding as far as raising the existing pipeline back to the main treatment air system on, you know, Gelman's property is that's got a 200 gallon per minute maximum capacity, and you can't add further to the capacity. The new Rose well, or, you know, that we're calling it, we named it after my wife, by the way.
What?
But the Rose well will be taking, you know, some of the capacity of the other wells.
Wait. Time out. Tell me this again, Charlie.
Pardon me?
You said something about Rose well.
Named it after my wife.
Named what after your wife?
The Rose well.
What's the Rose?
My wife's name is Rose.
It's a purge well?
No, they want to pump more north of the Evergreen, right? Rose.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a new well.
You're talking about Rose Drive well. because it's in the
Yeah,
Rose
yeah, yeah.
Drive
Yeah,
area.
proposed
All right.
well.
And
Yeah.
it just happens to be your wife.
Sorry,
I'm
yeah, the
hoping that we're
humor
not
doesn't
going back to naming
transmit so easily.
purge wells after city officials or relatives like Kim Davis and, you know.
You're saying, Brian, that they don't have the capacity at the central plant?
They have the capacity at the central plant, but they don't have the capacity to get it there without laying separate pipelines all the way back to the central plant. And
Okay, I'm really
that's
confused.
where, you know, this consent judgment lists options of, you know, Dan mentioned the storm sewer system or an NPDES discharge into First Sister Lake.
And we do know that there are homes on wells near Second Sister Lake, which this will all flow from first to second.
Well, Beth, it won't actually flow to second
Oh.
unless there's backwash from the high water in the First Sister Lake. But again, we haven't seen
That
any
Lakeview
studies.
Drive.
We haven't seen any studies about that. There's no data to support any of this stuff.
I would like to make a comment about the flood hazard potential. If you're filling up storm drain or freshwater runoff drains, or you're overtaxing the sisters lakes, that's adding an unnecessary hazard to those homeowners along either the sisters lake or along that freshwater drain pipe. That we've had issues with the city trying to do that with other projects and have stopped them from doing that and come up with alternative options, because when there's a big rain event, the pipe needs to be able to carry the storm flow, or you're going to have flooding, and that's unacceptable.
This
And
is
we can
absolutely
avoid that,
right
and we
with
should.
regard to pipes in the city. The pipes don't get bigger. When you discharge to the tributary, it just overflows or gets captured by.
Just in rough analysis, it would be like 100-year storm event going into the First Sister Lake every day.
Yeah.
So then what happens when we have a real rain event on top of that?
Right.
You used up all the capacity.
What about the rain garden we just built there is going to be underwater now?
Well, nobody's looked at that.
I'll stop now.
Yeah.
I'll stop for today.
It's another argument for EPA, I would say.
I mean, this sounds like another back of the napkin plan that the city consultant determined for the original pipeline back to the core from Evergreen, so that the company didn't have to go through normal city permitting to build a safe pipeline from Evergreen back to the core. Instead, they bypassed all the state laws, allow them to go down deep and make their 90 to 100 foot deep horizontal pipeline and purge wells. And then, and of course, that failed. The north horizontal well didn't fail, but the pipeline did because it was next to it, and the horizontal well was probably pulling out sand and creating a void, and there's probably a break in the transmission pipeline. So as a backup, to keep from continually putting hundreds of parts per billion back through that broken pipeline that leaked into the groundwater for several months, they relined the horizontal well and made it into the current transmission pipeline, which is why you don't see any more data from the north part of the horizontal well. And now there's no backup for that. So Brian's right, they can't really put more into that pipeline, which makes me wonder, why do they want to go back to the core and then back to the First Sister Lake when there's no pipelines to do either direction, when they could just buy a parcel, maybe Lockwood, give it to the city as a park and put a treatment system right there where they can pump out from those areas, discharge directly into the First Sister Lake at non-detect, and have a backup plan for if flooding is a problem and go from there. I mean, somebody must be thinking of that. But again, we're way early in this process, and we need to review all this stuff and hope that more materials get released quick enough that we can include those in our review. And I'm just not seeing that cooperation from the company. Somebody may want to make a request to the judge to free up that stuff quickly so we have a chance to review it. But it can't be me because I'm not a party to the case. But we have representatives, 3 parties to the case on screen here where they could do that.
Roger, I want to question, it's like, other than, you know, the on-site data, you're talking about what other things do you think exist that?
I don't think you have to specify it. I think all you have to do is say, we want all the data that you're used to make this proposal.
I'm not aware of anything else, honestly. Other, you know, the regular data that's being collected on, you know, whatever the normal basis is, the quarterly reports or whatever. I'm not aware of any.
I just told you about this, the secret soil sampling. And
well, that's what I'm talking about, Roger. You call it the secret soil sampling. I call it the on-site investigation.
Yeah, well, it's still secret. We still don't have it.
But Brian is committed to getting it.
Yes, we will. I
And any
get it somehow.
any data related to the First Sister Lake plan. Like, I don't understand the plan, how they got to the plan.
Well, it's not really a plan.
I mean,
it's
yes,
just
there's
an
high
idea.
concentration, but there's, yeah.
Just for the record, I have to point out the sad irony that we're right back at ground zero when Dan Bicknell discovered the illegal dumping of dioxane into the sister lakes under the road. How many years ago was that? And now we're talking about dumping into the sister lakes again.
Yeah, it was a different sister lake, but you're right.
One of the concerns that we've been back and forth on this conversation about the EPA and so on, and would they provide a better cleanup? And we're still, as you can see, the water has to come up, the water has to be treated somehow, and then the water has to go away somewhere. And those problems are going to exist no matter who's the regulatory body or agency in charge of this cleanup. And so we are kind of in this situation where there's, what more can be done? There besides just these extraction wells. Obviously, you see in there's other attempts to de-water areas and other approaches to the on the site properly and so on. And so obviously the whole thing is up for examination and desperately in need of not only comment if this doesn't seem appropriate but I would like to see suggestions from folks. Hey, this isn't appropriate, do it this way. Have you considered this? Have you considered that?
And
we can't talk about what was considered, and I'm not aware of like I said, we weren't in all those meetings. I got to as many as I could. But those types of suggestions, do it this way, please, do it that way, please, are going to be very valuable, not only to inform us as to our take on what's sitting here before us for a thumbs up or thumbs down, but for the judge and for the conversation moving forward. It's a good opportunity to create a record around this process that says, here's how we strongly believe it should be done.
Jeff, this is Dan Bicknell. In the petition that we wrote back in 2016 asking that the US EPA consider the Gelman site a Superfund site, we indicated that there was the technology called HIPOX, H-I-P-O-X, and that's the hydrogen peroxide treatment that in part Gelman is using. But there's a portable unit that you can take out 50 gallons per minute, 70 gallons per minute, and you can put it by a remedial area. It will extract the groundwater, treat it to below 1 part per billion dioxane, and then you can discharge that water locally or to any other area. So the beauty of this is you don't need these lines that run through the city or run through other areas. You just need an area that you can put this HYPOX system, and it's the size of a small little tool shed that you would park a lawnmower in. And we made that suggestion, 3 or 4 years ago in the 2016 preliminary assessment request. And I think that technology could maybe deal with what we're seeing as some concerns here with First Sister Lake.
Is it portable? Is that not the portable recommendation? EGLE, anybody want to speak
It
to
is, it is Gelman's portable unit, but my understanding it uses the same technology as the main unit, or the main treatment system.
That's not the HYPOX unit they're talking about?
I don't know the terminology well enough to know.
It's a version of it.
Yeah.
It's their version. It uses hydrogen peroxide and ozone. It's a
Dan,
Dan,
excuse me, Dan Himmel, why not consider discharging it back into the groundwater or discharging it into local stormwater system that's different from First Sister Lake?
So if I may, this is the product of negotiations. We didn't get everything that would be considered optimal, but we're not reviewing this to seek suggestions as to how to improve it, but whether or not it's acceptable. And so as you review these documents, I hope that you will point out what you find to be a deficiency, point out maybe what you would have preferred, but understand that it's not going to go back to the bargaining table. So just so you know,
well,
we're not continuing negotiations. We have not endorsed this. Our attorneys have not endorsed this. This is simply the best product that could be accomplished in negotiations with a tough bargainer, the polluter. So just keep that in mind, that we're not fly specking this to improve it. It really is a yes or no question.
well,
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack.
if it's EPA versus accepting this too, though. So that's why we do need to talk about other options. And, putting clean water into a First Sister Lake might not be a bad thing. It might aerate it. It could be good for the wetlands, but I don't know how at this rate and at this level of dioxane is unacceptable. I mean, in my opinion, but that's why I'm asking for data and who made this decision and why, and who says it's okay, and what's the contingency plan if it doesn't work out and there's homes underwater and there's not.
Yeah, let me just throw this out here too. It's like clean, it's the old how clean is clean thing. The surface water number 280 parts per billion is actually based upon, it's a water quality criterion. And it's based upon partial human contact and some human, consumption of it. We have 7.2 as our drinking water criterion. And, that's, based upon drinking it, every day for 36 years or something like that. There is also a criterion, which I don't know what the number is, maybe Dan does, for, biota, critters and the sediments, critters and, aquatic life criterion. And it is substantially higher than any of those. So, I mean, right now, Gelman is discharging, something that is kind of close to the drinking water criterion from, their main treatment plant. So, these are things that are, the relative things to take into consideration. Balancing, I'm basically calling it a hotspot removal at, and that's not the correct term, but that's kind of how I view it, for the Park Lake extraction well that, will run for some period of time.
What period of time? What period of time?
It's a minimum 2-year period of time, and then, it will continue until, I don't remember what the criterion is reached. shut it on off for some period of time. But even if it, meets the criterion for, influent at a lower number, within the 2-year period, it will still have to continue to run.
Okay,
But
so that's the
it's
minimum.
not
What's the
intended at this
maximum?
point. At this point in time, I don't have it all in front of me right now, so
Did
I can't
anybody
really
talk
tell you
about
what.
100-year maximum?
But where we are is it will, be, running for some period of time, but it's not there forever, basically, unless it never goes below whatever that, the cutoff point is.
I would like to make a point about the 280 part per billion shallow groundwater value. I don't think that's protective of the community on the west side, particularly. I think, Bob Bailey showed 100 part per billion as should be an action level. I do not see that being refuted by EGLE. So I would go with the 100 part per billion until otherwise. Bob Bailey has done this as a living. He's a PhD chemist. He worked for Dow Chemical. He's done consulting. He's done fate and transport for 1,4-dioxane. This is not an amateur effort. It's a significant effort. And he took a lot of time to do it. And I give him a lot of credit for doing it for us at no charge to anybody other than himself and his family.
Vince.
So I'm just saying that alone, in my mind, is a real red flag issue that needs to be addressed. And hopefully, we'll look at this and give EPA a real consideration, because I think, in my opinion, that's the way we should go, because it's going to get a lot more done and be a lot more safer for the community, be a lot faster. The way the state is moving now is polluter pay and total cleanups, and I think that's the way we need to go. I think that's where Michigan's going to end up.
Vince, I want to point out the 280 that I referenced is a surface water quality standard that is for, a criterion in surface water that is set by Water Resources Division. It is not applied to, West Park in the groundwater, vapor intrusion or anything like that. That is a human contact, wading in the water, swimming in the water kind of criterion. And, it's like, drinking water is a different criterion.
What's the criterion? What's the criterion for West Park near surface?
Well, that's different. I mean,
let's try to keep on one subject.
We're talking about something different.
Brian,
yeah.
Is 280 the criteria if water downstream is used for human consumption?
No.
What's that criteria?
If it was a drinking water source directly, pretty close, there's some level of judgment in how far, but the surface water criterion for drinking water is 3.5.
3.5.
Yes.
This is Rita Mitchell here. I have a question. Could you, anybody, address the implications of no vote on this consent judgment? And I'd like to hear the implications of a yes.
No vote?
The thumbs down. If there is a consent judgment, that is the thumbs down to the consent judgment that's being offered. And what are the implications of yes?
The implications of yes are easier to imagine, because the implications of yes are that it's entered by the court and the parties begin acting towards fulfilling the commitments that are outlined in it. And my understanding is that some of the research for that may already be happening. So the yes is an easy answer. The no, I couldn't tell you. I believe that a lot of that has to do with the judge.
What if it's conditional? What if it's a conditional yes? We have a conditional yes that all this stuff needs to be done, but we have all these concerns.
That's a choice.
So if you show proper treatment for X period of time, then the conditional part of the yes goes away. no,
Well, there are conditions already in the there are conditions for determining when they can end certain treatments, when they can start different treatments and things. There's conditions written into it, but our approval, I don't believe we have the choice for conditional approval. Like with everything that comes before us, we have to say yes or no to it.
Rita, this is Dan Bicknell. As you know, we still have the option of going US EPA Superfund site. What we need now, we got in 2017 the acceptance from US EPA to continue the process. What we need now is a concurrence letter from the governor saying that she agrees that the US EPA can continue on with this potential designation of the Gelman site as a US EPA Superfund site. So that's still a viable option that's out there.
And if I'm correct, we continue on this track. If they say no to this, the current consent judgment will still be, they still have to pump and treat like they currently are. They still have to watch it move under West Park and
yeah, there would be no change until the administrative order would be issued by US EPA on what needs to be done if this is a federal Superfund site. That's correct.
Yeah, there will be no changes if this consent judgment is not
changed.
Accepted and entered into. We won't get the benefits of that consent judgment. There's a fairly long list of good things, and I encourage you to watch Larry Lemke's videos. I thought he did a very good job of laying out the the pros of what are in the consent judgment, and and it's a very well done piece, and it explains well what the advantages are without having to actually read the whole.
Yeah, I watched all those. I watched all those, Brian, and I have about a list of 80 comments or concerns or clarifications too.
I know who Larry Lemke is, but what was his role in the consent judgment that he's got such a head start on analyzing it?
Well, he's the specialist retained by the city to analyze everything that's happening here.
Oh.
He's one of the specialists who advised us during the negotiations.
And his videos, if I understand this correctly, the content of those videos were also subject to the considerations of disclosure. And so those videos may have been edited and recast because the polluters said, you can't say that. And so every period in this thing has been argued over. It's crazy the stuff that I saw in these handful of meetings, including what we were allowed to release to the public, what you all get to see, including the content of Larry Lemke's videos and the narration of his videos, is my understanding. So it is what it is, and I think I definitely encourage everybody to watch them. It's well worth watching. It's a decent summary of it.
Well, they
like you, Roger, I have my own list, and when I asked some of those questions, I was told, yeah, well, he was going to say that, but we had to agree that he couldn't or whatever. And so,
Roger, I'd like to respond to Rita's question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I respond to Rita's question?
Please do.
Okay. She asked about the implications of a yes vote on all of this. One of the implications that I see is that all of the governmental entities will forever be involved with oversight. So in other words, each unit will have to continually monitor. There will potentially be a need for legal intervention if there are questionable activities or problems. So I think that for me, I'm concerned about that, particularly given the history here.
I have another question or comment. Isn't it possible that if the consent judgment is rejected, that the judge can just order the case to trial if the parties, unless the parties mutually agree to dismiss? This is an unusual case, but that's usually the way it is, that the case proceeds. If the parties don't agree to a settlement, then it proceeds to trial. That said, this would obviously, if we did that as an alternative to going through the EPA process, it would probably take about the same amount of time. You know, like 2 or 3 years, 4 years of litigation. Just my thumbnail estimate.
But Eric, but then
Also,
who
the discovery
administers
and
the
the
results?
experts and the
Who
costs.
administers the results of the verdict then?
That's up to the court. You know, the court
say
can appoint.
The court's not going to administer it. Who's he going to put it on? He's going to say, okay, the county, you have to administer this, or the EGLE, you have to take care of this better than you have so far. I mean,
The court has a lot of latitude to create judgments or to create settlement, not settlements, but to create a remedy. And who administers that remedy? It could also be in the court's jurisdiction. They could decide to have a special master or Larry Lemke or someone, and that would be paid out of from the judgment, if assuming that the judgment goes against Gelman and is not appealed, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I think the EPA, I mean, it just seems like going EPA is the answer.
So to follow up on what Eric said, if in fact this falls apart completely, this could go to trial. And then this is a consent judgment, just means the parties have agreed to the terms. But if the court eventually ordered a judgment, you know, issued an order, it's litigation under the state environmental laws. And I imagine that it would fall to EGLE to enforce the judgment of the court. So I don't know that you should have a very optimistic view of how this might go if it went to a full trial.
Agreed.
I was gonna say, I'm sorry, I had to walk away for a moment, but the, you know, and I've missed the discussion, but you know, it's like, question is what happens if, you know, one or more of the interveners chooses to, you know, to vote down on the up or down. And at that point in time, you know, I think it's Gelman files responses to answers and the litigation begins. And, you know, EGLE's not in a litigation mode at this point. We didn't separately sue or, you know, file an amended complaint or anything in order to, you know, revise the consent judgment. That's, you know, the 4 intervening entities that filed their own complaints to get into this case.
Brian, I know this is like asking you for a crystal ball, but I just gave an estimate of 2 to 4 years for litigation if the judge orders at the trial, discovery, et cetera.
Yeah, I have no idea, but yeah, sure.
And everybody's saying 2 to 4 years through EPA. So at the end, so that's a much more certain outcome.
Oh, I wouldn't be, you know, we have our differences about the certainty of an outcome with EPA being different from what's currently the remedy.
We've heard it's 2 to 20 years is the estimate.
Well, 20 years for the remediation for sure. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight.
Well, total drinking water cleanup, you know, all clean aquifers.
I beg to differ on whether you would achieve that result through EPA.
But that's what they will try
EPA
and do.
has,
Yeah.
but Brian, EPA has expressly said that they'd restore the aquifers to drinking water criteria regardless if it's in a prohibition zone or not, and they would halt the plume migration, which is completely different than you've got here.
Well, you know, Dan, I was at those same meetings, you know, the most recent one, and I didn't hear that.
In 2016, we had a joint meeting with the county, the city, the townships, and everybody in Region 5. And the division director specifically said that that was the policy of EPA, is restoration. And what you're talking about here is more or less continued dilution.
Dan, that's where they start. They don't necessarily stop there.
They will require it to be restored to drinking water criteria, no doubt about it. Well, I beg to differ too, having been a US EPA Superfund enforcement officer and a corporate officer at General Motors for 30 years. So
The unknown is the political environment in Washington as much as anything.
Well, I've talked to Debbie Stabenow, senator for Michigan, and she told me in 2016 that if there is a responsible party, EPA will get that responsible party to pay for all the cleanup. And it's when there's an orphan site, there's an issue. But when there's a responsible party, she said, even after Donald Trump was elected, this is after Trump's election, and he took office, she said EPA is still going after sites that have responsible parties. No question in her mind that that would happen in this case. And that's from our senator, who's actually on committees that oversee EPA and water qualities.
Well, if it wasn't for the political potential for political involvement, it would seem obvious, because they get the polluter pay law, they get especially in this case where you have, as you say, a solvent defendant. They love those cases because it's gravy for them. It's the orphan sites that are paying for everything.
Danaher is a $18 billion company. They are not going to be short.
I think you have to remember that all of the liability lies with Gelman, which is an incorporated entity that doesn't necessarily require Danaher to pick up the tab.
That's absolutely wrong from what I understand. I've heard from many sources that Danaher owns this contamination, and they're responsible to clean it up because they knowingly bought Gelman, or Paul, who had bought Gelman. And that's my impression. That's what I've heard.
I believe the corporate structure protects them, even though they own it as a subsidiary. But I'm not going to opine on that. This is not my area.
Would anyone like to comment on the prohibition zone boundaries? Roger, I'm sure you have something to say about that.
What they stink.
Well, I invite people to watch Larry's video about that, and he has a problem with the size of the prohibition zone. This is what's going to continue to happen if we don't have the same goals in mind.
This is why we have it percolating. We have it percolating into neighborhoods now near the surface, and that's a major problem that was not initially anticipated. Prohibition zones were supposed to isolate the contamination. It isn't doing that. It's causing more potential exposure, and there's no real remediation or solution given these current settings that we're looking at. And I don't know that even the proposed CJ has dealt with that issue. As this stuff percolates through the city at 280 part per billion, because that's a groundwater surface water interface, and there's no change to that. So we're going to have potentially 280 parts per billion up near homes and near the surface, and that's unacceptable.
Vince, this is Dan. They took away the 2,800 and they gave nothing to substitute it but a venting criteria into the rivers. Therefore, you can actually have theoretically higher than 2,800 pass through this prohibition zone, which they simply expanded. Expanding the prohibition zone allowed them to get more dilution and not do remediation, which is required, would have been required underneath this existing consent judgment.
You know, one thing I want to just throw out quickly that Larry didn't make this point in his videos is that the prohibition zone is expanded only to areas that are already connected to drinking water. That nobody's going to, fortunately, nobody's going to have to, change their, their drinking water source and start paying water bills that they weren't paying previously. And that was intentional to try to limit it to that. And the
Yeah, Brian,
expansion
that's
is
just on this round. That's just
the
on this round.
expansion. The expansion is you know, intended to encompass the area that, you know, the plume now defined by 7.2 instead of 85. And also it does provide a buffer, you know, between, you know, where the plume's edge at 7.2 is and where the edge of the prohibition zone is. And institutional controls it's an institutional control. It's designed to, you know, protect people from being exposed to it. And, you know, that's what it does.
That's what they said about the
Can you
original
define
prohibition zone.
Can you define what it is for me? I'm vague on what it is even.
The prohibition zone?
Yeah.
It's an area mapped out in the city of Ann Arbor where people are required to use the municipal drinking water source. When the original prohibition zone was created, there were a number of people that were on wells. And so they had to connect, disconnect their well and connect to the city water service and start paying water bills. And I think usually with that, there's also an obligation to connect to the city sewer service and pay sewer bills too.
And be annexed to the city if they're east of Wagner Road.
In some cases, but not currently. They're reducing doing that. But also, in the case of Weber Hotel was pumping water from the groundwater, which then contaminated the Sisters Lake.
Yeah,
and
they had a non-recirculating
that was
heat
in
pump.
violation, and they made So,
yeah, then open.
So that's another case where the prohibition zone comes into effect.
Well,
They were
there's your pipe to the
forced to
Sister
stop
Lake
doing
right
that.
there. Yeah, this is, I'm really disappointed in the quality of the results of 3 years of secret negotiations. I mean, Larry Lemke's summary kind of waters down a few things, and I'll have some comments on that later. I cherry picked some of the wells that were going down and not those that were going up. But I don't want to get into all the details on that until we have a chance to review it more thoroughly. So I encourage everybody to do that and stay tuned, because we're going to have some additional meetings between now and the next couple of weeks. We have to get lots of sleep and hammer this thing as best we can. So any last minute discussions? Anybody that wants to say something didn't get a chance to say, just
Ann Bannister's got her hand raised. Councilmember Bannister.
go ahead.
Yeah, I just had an idea that one thing we might do would be to like organize some watch parties online for the videos, so that and then people could chat along as in the box, and it might raise awareness that the videos are a great place to start to bite off a chunk of this information.
That's a good idea. I had an idea. Remember years ago there was a show called Pop-Up Video. Anybody remember that? I think it was like wasn't it
on
like
VH1?
Yeah, wasn't it like music videos, and then they would have a little pop-up balloon come up and tell you something about what was going on with that person or that song or something. I was thinking about doing a pop-up, taking Larry's videos and making it into a pop-up video, put my comments in and links to additional information, and then have people do a watch party on that.
Yeah. So if I might, I would point out that areas that you should pay particular attention to in the proposed CJ are the termination criteria.
Yep.
When they get to shut down efforts. Every mention of the NPDES permits, but also importantly, take a look at the settlement agreements. Basically what they're doing is they're asking us to dismiss ourselves as interveners. And in the City of Ann Arbor's settlement agreement, there's actually a penalty if we ever utter the words EPA. So you should pay close attention to those sorts of things. Don't forget, we do have that 2006 settlement agreement between Gelman and the city, which is a separate agreement entirely, which is somehow popped up in our settlement agreement. It's irrelevant in my opinion, but you should pay attention to that as well. So those are just the takeaways from my early review. And I encourage you all to speak up. But remember that we're not going back to the negotiation table. This is not a, could we get this improvement or get that improvement? It's a matter of, do the flaws you find make you recommend that we reject it? Or are the improvements such that this is something we can accept? There are huge improvements here. You know, the remediation at this pollution site is pretty significant, and I don't want to downplay that at all. There are some accomplishments in this agreement. It just comes down to whether the detriments are more than the benefits, because we would live under the current CJ if we don't reach an agreement. You know, just so you remember.
Thanks, Jack. Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Jack. I agree with everything you said there. They the notion that, I mean, some parts are good and some parts are bad. It's just the truth of the matter. I think that when we look at the remediation as an example, I know that, Roger, that you have some trend analysis, this historic data of how much has been pulled out and what the pump and treat gallons per minute are and so on, the combined pump and treat gallons per minute. And I was super interested in comparing what that is going to be moving forward if this were to go forward with their additional extraction wells to the historic levels of gallons per minute or pounds removed or whatever that criteria might be that we decide to look at. I'm very interested in how this stacks up moving forward with the historic actions on this site.
Okay, that's good, Jeff.
To see if, is it better compared to what we're in now after they've slowed it down, or is it less than what they were doing in the 90s or so on? And I would love to see where this action fits in with the historic volumes of treatment, I guess.
This is where I'm going to call on Dan Hamill to send in those reports that you promised to share periodically when you get the discharge, the pumping rates for each purge well. You're going to share that as you got them in, those Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, I think the last one was in March, as I believe.
Yeah. I just don't.
First quarter. I haven't gotten any more.
Are they on the website somewhere and I'm just not seeing them, or?
Yeah, they'll be under selected documents. I will say that I haven't got the second quarter of 2020. Basically, it's a list of all the pumping wells that have ever been there, and then the rates in the years, of pumping. Yeah. So I know that it is updated under, like I said, the first quarter of 2020, I think is the last one I have. I have a note, is one of the things of data I need to request from Gelman. They had transition of personnel. Laura retired when she was a key person in the office, actual office that coordinated providing that information to us. So they're transitioning. Their consultant is providing that information now. Well,
thanks,
it was
Dan.
a little hiccup.
Yep. Did you have
I'd like to propose that we have a meeting maybe like next Tuesday at 6 p.m. That's like our regular time when we used to meet, or we meet on the alternate months. Would that be
council
on Tuesday? Oh, because of Labor Day.
Scioto Township Board meeting too.
Okay.
Good idea, though.
Because of Labor Day. So what about a Friday, middle of the day, or I mean,
Friday's getting way
you know,
too down though. You mean this coming Friday?
yeah.
I don't know what's good for everybody. I'm open a lot, but and I tend to like you said, we should have some kind of ongoing. We're going to have to compress this down and break down the pluses and the minuses. And Dan Bicknell and I were talking about taking this chart and expanding it with what's in this proposal, and maybe we'll start with that and share it.
I'd really
And then
like to see the pros and cons. The
Right.
pros, like Jack was just talking about. I'd like to know what the positives are as.
Yeah.
I think those are mostly listed in that summary chart, which is I think the first document on the city page.
Yeah, what we need though are the details, like the duration of certain aspects of it. I'm really concerned that people don't really appreciate the time scale of cleaning up a site like this. I've looked at the Bethpage, New York site, which is just a little bit bigger and a little bit deeper, and their time frame is probably more realistic than what we've been told with this site. And we got to start facing reality here. We need an entity to oversee this that's going to be around for a long time. Jim.
What was the Bethpage number?
I'll talk to you about it later. Jim.
I think it was at a meeting last fall, and there was a representative from the EPA there, and she said that the time frame for doing something would be like, I don't know, 10 to 14 years before they could actually start coming in and start working. Do you remember that meeting? I think you were videotaping it, Roger.
But was that on a site that hasn't gotten to this point?
I'm sorry?
Was that at a site where we have a lot of data and analysis on this site. We just don't have the enforcement oversight capability to force the company to do what's really required. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, Jim, this is Dan Bicknell. That's the timeline if you start from scratch and you have nothing. But at this Gelman site, we have lots and lots of historical data. And additionally, you have an action, groundwater extraction and treatment. And in US EPA, you can do what they call an interim remedial action, which is essentially being able to enhance this groundwater extraction and treatment. So that'll only take a couple years to really move into an enhanced groundwater extraction and treatment mode once we ask EPA to begin this work.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. She was just creating a lot of gloom at the meeting. So
I just wanted, and this is my opinion, not Eagles. Yeah, the EPA just realized too that Gelman will probably object in court for doing things they don't want to do. So you please go into that eyes open.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. They're going to be, like they have been with you all, recalcitrant, potentially responsible parties. But you have the Department of Justice to match them up in court, and you have a lot of the law under CERCLA, the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, which is much more powerful than the Part 201 provision. So in that mode, you're right, Gelman's going to drag, but with the Department of Justice and CERCLA behind you, you can compel them to do a lot more work. And that compulsion will get them to be restoring the aquifer and halting the plume migration, which are the tenets of US EPA on remediation sites.
So once again, I want to point out that you need to pay close attention to the termination criteria, because I don't think that Gelman sees this as a 10-year project. I think that they think that in the not too distant future, they're going to get down to the 500 micrograms per kilogram criteria that allows them to stop extracting and treating. And so pay close attention to every time the word termination comes up in the the CJ, because they are foreseeing an end to this well before it's completely cleaned up. That's not their goal here. So just so that you're paying attention to what this agreement actually foresees as the end.
Good advice.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right, I think we're going to have some, keep an eye out on your emails for meeting announcements as we decide when we are ready to have another Zoom meeting. We might have some really quick meetings on certain topics, or we might, fold it into one larger meeting, but we've got to schedule around all of the other meetings that have to be scheduled. So don't go on vacations or anything. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
We can all get off. I've got to wait for this chat to finish.
Hey, Roger, I'm trying to figure out how to close